All right. The reason I wanted to pull both of y'all in because I've looked at doing what I've been doing for so long, involved with Open Carry Texas since the beginning, even though me and you haven't ever met until just recently, CJ. Doing the podcast that I was doing, which was about politics and survivalist, prepping, stuff like that. These intel and counter intel stuff have come up in the past. I've learned some, but my level is below David's and David's is below yours. You know, I don't know if anybody that's got the background as much as you, CJ.
All right, guys, I'm here with CJ Grisham. And CJ, tell me a little bit about your background.
So I am a 20-plus year retired Army First Sergeant and Counterintelligence Special Agent. I am a Senior Counterintelligence Special Agent was my official title. So I come from counterintel, interrogations. I was a signal intelligence interceptor, so I did a little bit of time working within the NSA sphere of things, and towards the end of my career, other alphabet agencies.
I wanted to try to pull a little bit more information that wasn't on David's video, and some of it we may have to go back over, but we're basically, my thought is basically that even though we're a loosely knit organization, or not organization, but group of people that work, you know, defending our First Amendment rights and free speech, etc., that the counter intel is coming into play since what David and I talked about since Almost Park, seeing more activity in that line. So my question, I want to start out with a question, and then I'll let David put in there something if he wants to, or you can add in whatever you want to, is do you think it's important for the people in the First Amendment group to understand counter intel, and so they can see what's going on and be more aware of how to protect themselves from it?
I think anyone involved in activism should understand how the enemy works, and they should understand any potential tactics or actual tactics that are being employed against them. It is very important when you're involved in activism, especially activism that is politically hostile. And I guess hostile is not the word, volatile. That's the word I'm looking for. When you've got issues that are politically volatile, and what I mean by that is a lot of activist issues are very simple. It's generally ideologies, you know, pro-life, anti-life, you know, those kinds of things. But the Second and First Amendment, these are issues that directly deal with government. And so your adversary isn't a fellow citizen, it's your government. And so when it's your government, the government tends to be very, you know, they got very thin skin. They don't like to be criticized. They don't like to be questioned. They don't like their authority minimized. Control is exactly what government needs to form its objectives, any objective. I mean, if you think about anything the government is supposed to do, it requires a level of control, and they don't want to give that up. So it is vitally important for First Amendment activists, especially because the First Amendment applies to government and not to you and me. I mean, you can censor me on this broadcast all you want, and you're not violating my First Amendment right. If government was censoring me on your broadcast, then my First Amendment rights would be violated. And so that's why it's important that they understand tactics, because if you're going to be successful, you've got to understand how the enemy operates, and that's exactly what counterintel is all about.
David, you got something you want to pitch in with?
Yeah. I mean, he hit on it really hard right there. I mean, it's the government doesn't like its power to be questioned or its power to be removed. It depends on having teeth to accomplish its goals, and so it has to keep us in check. You know, we are the tip of the spear when it comes to pushing back the government and their infringement on our rights, and they don't like it. They don't like it. So primarily, of course, our focus is on law enforcement. Well, now I have screenshots. I can't share them here, but I'll send them over to you guys if y'all want to see them, from certain Facebook pages and law enforcement only chat groups where they are talking about, and it's sponsored by the good old Fraternal Order of Police. They're talking about pushing back against auditors. And you're seeing that pushback with Chi-Town Sioux and, you know, all those people up north are getting the worst of it. But it's also happening, you know, right here in Texas. You know, we're seeing it there in Almost Park and with Leon Valley. Leon Valley was the best organized police response that was sponsored by the Fusion Centers. Okay, all the intel that they had came from the Fusion Center. I've seen the intel. I've seen the actual documents they got from the Fusion Center, and they got that stuff for what? For a bunch of law-abiding citizens coming out to seek redress from the government. So the Fusion Center is not tracking terrorists. They're tracking political activists, people that are pushing back and putting the government in check. That's who they're following. And it's been that way for quite some time. And that's not how it's supposed to be. That's not the mission that the Fusion Centers were carved out and given. And CJ can tell you more about the Fusion Centers. You know them as oh crap, what do you call those?
Well, there's Joint Terrorism Task Force, but there's also the Joint Task Force. And I'll add to something that you had said that, you know, in Leon Valley, you're talking about organized responses and how are they going to respond to these auditors. And this is part of the tactics. The first thing you do is you lay the bait, and or you trip the mine. And what that is so if you go back to the history of the First Amendment auditors, the reason y'all do what you do is because government has trampled on your rights since 9/11, basically. They created a pretense. They began to violate people's rights, and so people began to stand up. Now, what the government is doing and what the counterintel is doing is they're trying to blame the victims. And so the whole thing started because government started cracking down on First Amendment auditors, or I'm sorry, First Amendment activities, which created First Amendment auditors. And so because the auditors now exist, the government has created its own boogeyman. And now they have to respond and ratchet up the level of response. So it's kind of a cyclical cycle. And this is the first thing that they did was they created the situation. The people responded to the situation government created. And now government feels like, okay, now we have the excuse that we need to respond even further. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next step is legislation. We see it already, especially here in Texas. I mean, this last session, there was a bill passed here in Texas that made it a hate crime to target law enforcement, a profession, not a type of people, but a profession. And this is laying the building blocks. The next step is going to be, it's going to be illegal to film because the courts, they've lost in the courts, but that's because it's unconstitutional. But if they can get it into the Constitution or into the laws that you can't film certain places, then that's how they create their probable cause, and that's how they shut it down. And so it's a perpetual cycle that they initiate to ratchet up how to best clamp down on these things. So you've got to create the situation first, or the circumstances for the situation to exist so that you can respond to the situation that exists because of your circumstances.
Yeah, we've seen that before where government does something intentionally knowing that if they're going to upset certain people, and they use that to even further their cause of whatever, you know, their end is that they want.
Right.
Is there a way or any advice you have of what people should be looking for to kind of be aware and recognize some of these actions?
Well, there is, especially on social media. You've got to be very guarded about your information. and I know I'm giving this advice as someone who doesn't practice this advice because I've got a pretty wide open social media, but I'm also very sure that I know who I'm looking into. And I know I've got some spies on my Facebook page, but I know who they are. And so the first thing you can do to guard against that is make sure that when you get friend requests or you're speaking to people, that you know exactly who you're speaking to. And Facebook has made it harder lately to detect these profiles because now you can backdate posts. So you can put up a post and say, make this post go live on February 2nd of 2016. So your profile looks older than it really is. And but that's one of the kickers is looking at these profiles and looking into the history before you approve these people and looking at who the friends are. And if there's only one or two friends that you have in common, that's either a tip that person might be a troll or somebody that is trying to spy on you, or I mean, it just could be that person likes who you are, or maybe you met them somewhere on the street and now they're gonna add you. But one of the things you can do is if you see somebody that's trying to get a relationship with you through social media and you can see that they're followed by somebody that you know and trust, then talk to that person and say, hey, do you know this person? And sometimes they're like, no, I got a friend request from them and I just accepted it. And then you know not to add that individual. But you want to look out for the people who are very aggressive when they first get to know you, or they first introduce themselves. They might be very aggressive in talking to you, and it doesn't have to be anything specific. They might not even be pulling information directly from you, but what they may be doing is just, hey, what's going on? How's your day today? And just very innocuous kind of statements about things, just so that they keep you connected and engaged. And all they're trying to do is build that rapport. And good spies can take years of building rapport for you. So you got to always be on guard for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something else that I see a lot of. They'll come and they'll be nice for a while, and then all of a sudden they'll post some kind of crazy comment like, "Oh man, you should have shot that cop," or we should be out killing the police, or something like that. And what that's designed to do is get you to comment, okay, and get you to say something stupid, that even something that's not negative, but that they can take and twist to mean whatever they want it to mean. And
right.
And I've had that happen to me once before. I had a guy make a comment on a video that said something to the effect of you've been walking around and you're locked and loaded. And I said, yeah. I said, I'm locked and loaded with armor piercing truth bullets, and or something like that. And I got called in front of a judge for that. True story.
Well,
yeah, when I ever hear stuff like that, I always have a very simple response. Oh, they should have just shot him, or you should have just shot him. And I always talk about, I don't believe in violence. My response is very simple. I don't believe in violence except in response to violence. And it's a very broad statement. So I said, I don't care who you are. If you're violent towards me, I'm going to be violent back. And it's a very, it's not point going, kill the cops or kill the people or kill this guy or that guy. I mean, and I believe that. I don't think violence is ever justified except in defense of violence.
And I agree with you. I make it very clear to people on my channel that I don't call for, ask for, or support any acts of violence towards anybody.
Yeah, I'm a very peaceful person. I don't like violence. I never have, but I have been forced into situations a few times.
When you don't have any other options.
Yeah, and I regret it that I couldn't figure out how to get out of it sometimes, but you just can't.
Yeah, and you got to be careful too, because while that is an indicator, what you want to look for, and I briefly talked about this on the video I did with David, is you want to look for clusters, because one thing alone does not create an indicator, because there literally are people out there who are on our side who are fed up with government killing us and beating us and tasing us and jailing us and assaulting us and fining us and stealing our money and stealing our property and stealing our dignity and stealing our freedom, that they truly do believe that more cops need to die in order for us to accomplish anything. And that doesn't mean that they're trying to set us up. It just means that they're frustrated, fed up, and misguided. And yeah, and so that we've just got to be careful. But you want to look for clusters. So that is one indicator, but you want to add it with other indicators. For example, like I mentioned, this is somebody that just came into your life. This is somebody who has expressed a sudden interest in you. This is somebody who, might have, you look at their friends list, or you look at some of their likes, and you look at some of the groups that they're in, and those are indicators as well that these are probably government agents. So you want to find a series of clusters, not just any one thing. You can never key off on any one thing, because that one thing might or might not be true for what your narrative is. And I look at it as like a GPS.
Well, I just use it. I just use it as it's a red flag. It's one of the things I look for.
Yes, it is a red flag, and it's something that should definitely tip some interest in your mind to start looking for those other indicators that will create a cluster.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to ask a question, and then we can keep going on this if we. But I've been asked this before. I forget, because I've been trying to remember what it was since we started, because I forgot to write it down.
Old age setting in, huh, Steve?
Yeah. Well, my mind goes over here, then it goes over there. As I listen to y'all, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and then I get sidetracked. So we always hear that. How many times we heard this in this day and age, where the terrorists are out videoing, the courthouses and the police, and they're setting us up, and they're ready to come kill us all, and all that kind of stupid shit. Now, the only time I can remember actually having proof that people were using video or photos to help take something down militarily or in the government was Japan and Hawaii. All right, Pearl Harbor. That's the only one I can find there's proof of. Now, I do remember seeing something about Oklahoma City where somebody reported that they thought they saw somebody taking video out front a few, short time before all that happened, a few days or whatever it was. But I never found any documentation from the government proving it. CJ, do you know of anything where terrorists in this country have been out videotaping any of these terrorist incidents to set things up, to plan things?
Well, every good terrorist operation always has one of the very first phase of any terrorist operation is surveillance. So whether we know about it or not, it's happening. So surveillance is that's why the whole in this day and age thing is a false argument, because throughout history, whether it's a non-state actor, which is a terrorist, or a state actor, which is a government spy, a Russian spy, a Chinese spy, a German spy, whatever it might be, a Japanese spy. The first stage of any operation is always surveillance. So the in this day and age argument is baseless, because there's no difference between what's happening today and what happened during the Revolutionary War. Our founding fathers had spies out there before we went against. We didn't just wake up one day and go, okay, let's go fight the British. No, we learned how they operated, where they operated. How are we going to, where do we target them? I mean, it's been, look, you look at Benedict Arnold. I mean, throughout history, we've had these kinds of things. So I always go back with the in this day and age argument, and I just kick it back to them and go, there's nothing different about today than any time in history, anytime, even before America was born.
Yeah.
We have the exact same threats. It's just the sophistication of the threats is different.
Yeah.
Instead of
My saying is, it's always been this day and age.
It's always been in this day and age. But the problem is we activists try to argue their points. We try to defend their points. And what we need to learn is we need to learn how to be what's called confrontational politicians. And that is, and I don't mean like get in your face, but when they throw something at you that they use as an excuse to infringe on your rights, instead of going on the defensive, deflect it back on them and destroy their argument.
That's what I'm working on now. I got a list of things I've been starting to build so when I do get back out there, I got some new things to use. Hopefully it'll work out.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, Steve, I'll tell you when, I'll give you, for instance, when I was in Germany, our biggest trouble there was with the Baader Meinhof gang. And they didn't go around taking pictures. They didn't need to take pictures. They would just walk off their distances. They would, and go around the corner and write it down. They could draw pictures of what they wanted, But now, what do we have now? You've got Google Earth, Google Street View. You've got social media. You can track and get photographs of, police officers, politicians, off of social media. You don't need to put somebody out there to get pictures of somebody or to get pictures of a gate or anything like that. You don't need that real-time intelligence under most circumstances. To drive a car bomb up and blow up a building, you don't need real-time surveillance for that. All you need to do is drive up in front of the building and park. So
or drive into it.
Or drive into it, But most of the thing that gets me is that most of the things that they claim are targets are bull crap. Okay. If I set off a bomb in a refinery, all right, I'm going to take out a very small portion of the refinery, but there are enough checks and balances and safety devices in place to contain that explosion and whatever damage is done. And most refineries, contrary to what most people believe, are not that populated. So what you're trying to do, you're trying to blow it up and get some kind of chemical cloud released. It's too hit and miss. Why do that where maybe I get to kill 10 people or 15 people or 20 people when I can walk into a school, an elementary school, and just start shooting?
Zone.
Gun-free zone and kill 100 kids. I mean, what is more terroristic than that? How many people remember the name of the 9/11 terrorists? Okay. Now, how many people remember the names of the shooters at the Colorado High School or Newtown, or
Fort Hood?
So that's my point. Which one garnishes attention that's memorable? Because remember, the goal of terrorism is to change us and alter our psyche and make us live in fear and change our politics. What changes politics more than a school shooting? I mean, whole states are banning, black guns for that.
Yeah, I think.
Well, David, I'll tell you
something in here.
Yeah, I'll tell you that that's not entirely accurate. I mean, it's accurate. I understand what you're saying, but the goal of terrorists isn't just to kill people, but to disrupt our society and create the kinds of changes. And so, blowing up an oil refinery does have just as much of an impact, even if there's only one death, as a school shooting would have. The problem is it doesn't have the emotional depth that the left can use or that the government can use to undermine our liberty as much as dead kids. And so you hear about the dead kids, and government uses the dead kids because, to be honest with you, if most people, when they hear that government was attacked, it's not personal to them. They don't care. It disrupts our lives, because if you disrupt an oil refinery or you disrupt a water plant or you blow up a major bridge in a city that's a major artery, that causes an impact, and it creates that same fear. The problem is those types of targets are faceless. And these days the terrorists do want the faceless targets, but we can't discount the fact, and I'm just trying to say that even though none of these should be excuses, a refinery is just as much of a quote unquote sensitive area because it is key to our infrastructure as a school is, but they just use it differently. And so just from a terrorism standpoint, that's just all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that one is more or less strategic or tactical. It's just that they are both targets and they both have value. They just can't be used very well. A terrorist isn't going to go around going, oh, look at me, I blew up a refinery. Oh, but we've got other refineries. But when they can say, look at the children I destroyed, or look at the football stadium, look at all the people I killed, that has a more emotional effect than, oh, look, I blew up a government office and some government workers died. No one really cares about that. And so that's why terrorists have altered their plans. But those are still targets, though. I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
Well, I think terrorists, we'll just go back to 9/11, all right? Because this is where this conversation for me and my friends came up first. Was within a few days of 9/11, the first few days, none of us talked. I think we were just in shock and just sitting back and going, wow, but within a few days, we were talking about, now the government is going to use this. They're going to use it to come be more aggressive, shut down rights, as they're doing now, as we're seeing, which is like we said earlier, that's why we're starting to push back, because what they did. But the terrorists, although I'm not even going to use a descriptive word for them, but the terrorists, I believe we're smart enough to understand that their actions would be used by our government to pull some of this kind of stuff, which disrupts our lives, our freedoms. And that's part of what they wanted.
And the thing is, the thing that the government doesn't quite get, and David is very skillful at exposing, is even though the terrorists might be out there filming or taking pictures, you're not going to see them. If the refinery is the target, you're not going to see a bunch of terrorists out there blatantly, openly, brazenly filming, because even if they don't care if they get caught, that's not what they're going to do, because they don't want to run that risk, because the risk when you're out there and the surveillance, just so y'all know, the surveillance phase of any terrorist operation is when you are most susceptible to your plans being destroyed. That if you're going to catch them, that's going to be your best opportunity to catch them, is during the surveillance phase. And that's when they all trip up. And generally the ones that we catch ahead of time, that's the reason we caught them, because somebody did see something and report it, and then they looked into it or whatever. But that's because they were trying to hide it and they were captured. And they don't want to be out there in the open, because them getting caught, even if they dress like David, them getting caught doesn't help them to accomplish their mission and achieve their objective and finalize everything. So even the argument about, because David's always doing a good job of going, look, guys, I'm in a bright red vest. I'm out here in the open. It's obvious I'm filming you. And I'm sorry, the argument that, well, see, now the terrorists are just going to openly film because these First Amendment auditors are out there giving them ideas. No, it doesn't matter, because even still, I would not, as a counter intel guy, if I were operating in a foreign country, I still would not operate openly, even knowing that there are activists out there that are doing and I can even pose myself as an activist. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. The risk is way too high.
Yeah, especially with the amount of resources the government has with facial recognition and phone tapping and all that. They see that, they run it, they say, oh, well, look who this guy's involved with. So we got to check up on him, and that exposes the whole thing, maybe.
Yeah.
So I basically just reiterated what you said, but I had to. I couldn't help it. All right, so, sorry. Does anybody have anything they want to add here? Because I think we've probably gone far enough with this video as far as time-wise.
You know, this is a very difficult. It literally would take months and months of training for activists to completely understand how to perform counter surveillance, or to test the kinds of people that they're worried about. But the idea is, what I would give as advice to activists who are concerned that perhaps they're being infiltrated. You can always find ways. Well, let me start with this. First of all, if you're an activist and you're always doing the right thing and you have the right intentions, you never have anything to worry about anyway. You don't have to worry about getting tripped up. You don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing because your heart's in the right place. You know the law and you're doing everything right anyway. So, you know, if you're someone like me and David have said, we don't believe in violence and we truly don't believe in violence, then we're not going to make statements that say we believe in violence behind the scenes. So if you're truly someone like that and you have nothing to hide, then you don't have to worry about all this other kind of, you know, getting tripped up. But that being said, if you are worried about that kind of thing and you want to start laying some traps, just make sure that you lay the traps in a legal manner. But there are ways that you can expose these kinds of people by planting little seeds. You can say things to some people and not say them to others that you might trust or that might have built your trust, and find out if anyone else finds out about these kinds of things. You can feed some information that may or may not be true to, you know, one group of friends, and then some information that may or may not be true but is different to another group of friends to find out if that conflict exists. Because what's going to happen is a lot of times you might have a core group that you trust and that you've trusted for a long time, and they're your true friends in every sense of the way. And then you've got that group of friends that you've probably grown to trust who might be the infiltrators. And those people aren't going to talk to each other. Those two groups aren't going to talk to each other. So a good test is if you tell one group one thing and that group sort of goes to the other group and they start discussing, you know, hey, you know, David said this, they're not going to do that because that's the intel that they're building. So that's kind of hard to explain.
Well, I think
that makes sense.
I don't think it is. I think that was
okay.
At least it is to me. And if it's clear to me, it's going to be clear to a lot of people.
Okay, gotcha. So I mean, yeah, just lay those are my two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is, this is kind of why I'm not really too worried about having open social media, because I know what to look for, and if I am concerned, I know how to lay the traps to catch them. And second, because I have no evil intent, I have no desire to see my country get destroyed. I know that I don't have to worry about what I have to say because I'm not a violent person. I don't believe in violence except in self-defense. So I would never say anything, even if I had a spy in my midst, that would cause me to get arrested. And I wouldn't let anybody egg me into that because they can't change my mind on this. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bunny, we are doing a different video, but there's not going to be a meeting tonight, but you can hang around if you want to. I'm using the same one as we use for our Wednesday night meetings. It starts at 8.
Oh, okay.
I didn't call for a meeting. I did not call for a meeting, but
well, that's all I've got to say, though. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
And I agree with CJ. Is, you know, I don't worry about people spying on me. I don't worry about, you know, all that stuff for one simple reason: I don't break the law. You know, the whole point of what we do is that our activities are lawful activities, and if you're doing the right thing and you're following the law to the best of your ability, there's nothing to get you for. And the only thing I worry about, and I've learned my lesson on that, is the whole baiting thing. When people come in there trying to do the baiting thing, get you to say things that you know you shouldn't be saying, be careful, because they'll take something innocent and twist it to mean what they want to do and what they want it to mean. We see that with law enforcement all the time, all the time.
Well, I want to
record everything. Record your phone calls. Record your discussions. Record everything.
Yep. I have cameras that go with me everywhere. I've got one that I carry in my pocket all the time.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to give people a little bit more insight because it has come up in a few, like we said, since Almost Park, but some of the other people have been talking about it too. What we do does not start when when we get out on the street with our cameras, and then stop when we leave the streets with our cameras. It's a whole life situation. You know, now that you're doing this, you're in it, and it's not just when you get out in that street; it's everything. So,
and I actually want to find some time and go and work with CJ and kind of perfect his street cred, his street methods. Because I noticed in Almost Park, he needs a little bit of polish.
Well, yeah, I still let my emotions get to me, but I'll tell you this. I will tell
it's
you
easy
that,
to do that.
I will tell you, if you are going to get in activism, though, you have got to know every aspect of the law. You have to be able to argue and understand every aspect that they're going to throw at you. When I'm doing activism, for the most part, although in Almost Park I broke this rule, but I don't jaywalk. I follow every rule. I wait till the light turns green before I cross. All that kind of stuff. If you're going to be, you don't want to give them a reason, and so make sure you know the law, you can articulate the law, and that you know you're not breaking the law.